Welcome back for another OG Show Live. Mr. Randall, how you doing?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Reel Down.
Welcome back to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs.
Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to once again the Bass Kayak Beers.
Brother, this is the final cast.
Another segment of Chasing the Tide, your saltwater connection on the Paddle and Fin.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Feather and Fur. Your host, Brad.
Welcome back to the Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Crystal.
Hey, welcome back to Off the Water.
Susie Q here with Adventures of Outdoor Woman podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to the Rusty Hook Kayak Fishing Podcast.
We're brought to you by Pelican, built tough for all situations. Go to pelican.com. Eastport Marina on the beautiful shores of Dale Hollow Lake. For all your lodging, kayaking, go to eastport.info. Yak Gadget for all your fine kayak fishing accessory needs. Go to yakgadget.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin Podcast. I am your co-host, Sean, and with me, as always, Susie is back. So welcome back, Susie.
Thank you.
The she shed is looking pretty sweet, I gotta say.
Yep, you can kind of see, my shelves have gotten moved in on the past few days here. I've been working on slowly going through my stuff since I haven't touched anything since June. But I just recently had, I think, my second to last physical therapy yesterday. So, he says that strength's looking real good. Motion and everything's really good. So I'm getting the itch to go fishing, even though it's like, end of October. But
hopefully you can sneak in some good stuff before it gets too cold out there.
Yep. So yeah, we'll see if I can't, scratch the itch before, too long here. But yeah, I got a lot of work to do this winter, so I'll definitely be kept busy.
Good. All right. Well, tonight I was searching around for a rig that I started hearing a little bit more about lately, and I found a really good article written on it on Wired to Fish. And so I kind of hit up the author of the article and just to see if he'd be interested in coming on and talking about that. And he graciously accepted. I know if you guys remember a few months back, we had McKeon Roberts on from Wired to Fish. He's another writer for Wired to Fish, and he gave us some great info. So I know the Wired to Fish guys know what they're talking about. So I was happy when Shaye Baker accepted my invitation to come on the Noobs show and to give us some juice on the free rig. So we're going to talk to him a little bit. I'll bring him on right now. Welcome, Shaye. Thank you so much for coming on the Bass Fishing for Noobs show. It's a pleasure to have you, sir.
How's it going?
Not bad. How about how's it going for you, man?
Pretty good. I heard y'all talking about it getting too cold to go fishing, and we don't fortunately have to worry about that too much down here in Alabama.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we have a couple of hosts down your way, and I'm always super jealous of them. Now, I use a dry suit, so I do fish even in the freaking cold weather, but it's not the most pleasant experience. I can't lie. So I'm definitely
here in Alabama. It'll get down to 40s and 20s sometimes, and I'll still head south. I'll go down to Florida. I'm like, I don't know this cold. I can't imagine what y'all are dealing with.
It's just, an easy day trip for you, probably, right?
How long will it be before it gets anywhere near that cold down there?
Really, our coldest weather is like February and March, mainly February, late January, early February. It gets down. I remember like 2 or 3 years ago, it was 17, 18 degrees for like 6 or 7 days straight. And that's the coldest it's been in years and years down here as far as any kind of stretch. Usually it's 30s and 40s, and then every now and then you'll have a 20 or something like that, but it's for one night, and you just have to wrap up all the outdoor spigots, water spigots and stuff like that, make sure nothing freezes and busts, and then you're good to go again. So that's our winter rising.
Well, I got to say, the past couple of years we've had our podcast meetup down at Dale Hollow Lake, and I keep going down there expecting it to be warm, and every time we go down there, it is cold.
It's been cold.
Like I woke up the one morning and there was frost all over my kayak. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
I'm going back to Pennsylvania where the weather's warmer, you know? No.
Yeah. That frost is pretty much southern snow. That's all we'll get. It'll glisten for a little while. Like it's melted off, and that's it.
Yeah, that was nice. I mean, by the time I was out on the water, it was, everything was, gone, and it was fine, but definitely a little brisk first thing in the morning. But well, for the folks who don't know you, why don't you just let the folks know who you are, where you're from, and then kind of how you got into fishing. And I'd love to find out just, how you got involved with Wired to Fish, like how that came about.
Yeah. I started off fishing, like I tell people, I was fishing while I was still in the womb. My mom and dad was out in the boat, I'm sure, while she was pregnant with me. So my dad's fished all his life, and then I took it up right at, his babysitting routine was take me and my sister and put us under the steering wheel of the boat and put an umbrella off to the side and a jug of Kool-Aid and some chocolate chip cookies, and we were good to go. So eventually you pick up a rod and, drug a cork behind the boat for a few years trying to catch a brim, telling him to slow down. He would never slow down. So I had to pick up a bass fishing rod. And that's pretty much how I got started. And then we fished local tournaments together growing up for bass. And I'm here in central Alabama. So Lake Martin's my home lake, it's a tough lake, but it's got a pretty good diversity. It's mainly, deep, clear lake, but then you also have some muddy water and not much vegetation on it. But one of the cool things about Alabama, and I think one of the reasons a lot of people move here from the West Coast and up north and everything, is you can fish year round here, but you can also fish an extreme variation of cover. So you can fish deep rock, clear, muddy, grass, hydrilla, all kinds of vegetation, lily pads, everything you got vegetation wise. And then creeks, rivers, impoundments, you have just a wide variety of things you can fish. So you have good ledge fishing. You have good, Smith Lake's like a deep herring lake. You have just a little bit of everything. So, so growing up around here, I got to fish all those different places. And I got to Auburn University in the second semester I was there. We started a bass fishing team. And so I fished for Auburn for 4 years. And my senior year was Jordan Lee's freshman year. And he and I were partners. And,
Wow.
My partner and I had finished third in the national championship the year before for FLW, was the big college fishing series at the time. And then, so Jordan and I fished the second year and we finished third as well. And so in one of those tournaments, I think it was the first one, we were in like the top five. We led the first day and then had a terrible day too. And then on the final day, it was just five of us and we still made the top five. And the editor-in-chief for the magazine, Colin Moore for FLW, he was following us doing like live updates on Twitter at the time. And it's 1 o'clock and we ain't got nothing, we're zero. And I said, if this fishing thing doesn't work out, I sure could use a job writing. And he said, you like to write? I said, about fishing, I do. And so I didn't think anything else about it. I ended up catching 3 pretty good ones and we finished third. And at the end of the day, I was talking to my dad and he said, Colin Moore? I was like, yeah, he's the editor for the magazine. And he said, he talked to me for like an hour in the crowd, while y'all was weighing in and everything. And he said he wanted you to write some stuff for him. So that got me my first couple of things. And it's interesting, like terrible day on the water led to the start of my career, So I wrote a couple of pre-things for the college section of the magazine. And then they hired me to do something called Pro Lessons, which was a new thing they had where a writer and an angler went out with a pro and then tried to learn something and convey it to the reader. So I got to go like punching with JT Kinney and learn how to do that, and frog fishing with Randall Tharp on Gunnersville. And so I'm throwing my frog, not getting any bites. He's throwing a frog and he sets it down in the water and his sinks because he's got lead in it and where it would make an impression in the mat. So I got to learn all kinds of cool things like that and then write about them for the readers. And so that's kind of how I got started. And Wired to Fish, I was doing a little bit of stuff with them at the same time too. I'd met those guys at the Classic maybe the year before. So I was starting to do some stuff for FLW and starting to do some stuff for Wired to Fish, and then also finishing up my college career and entering into the Opens and the Everstarts at the time. Now they're called the Toyota Series or Costa Series. It's changed names 2 or 3 times, but the mid-level stuff at FLW, which is now MLF. A lot of stuff shifted around since back then. But anyway, I kind of started doing some tournaments, mid-level tournaments, and I started working some. And I ended up transitioning to working with bass, and I was fishing the Opens, but I was just doing it all part-time. And it got to the I don't even remember what year it was now, but there was a wild card tournament on Okeechobee, and it was at the end of the year, and anybody that had fished the opens or the elites could fish it. And it was the last chance to get a Bassmaster Classic berth. And I was contract, but I was supposed to work the Classic coming up doing the GoPro stuff. I had introduced that whole company to like GoPro footage, and I told them like, look, we had six camera guys and 12 guys on the water on the final day at the time. And I was like, for one more person, I'll run 6 GoPros, and at least you get something from a guy if they catch them. They're like 7th, because the program before that was the guy in 7th goes to catch them. They pull a camera guy out of the top 6 boats and put him in that boat. Well, then that guy starts catching them and gets back ahead of the guy because he was in 7th. Yada, yada, yada. So they said, that's not a job. You can come do bass track. If you want to, you can play with that on the side. So I started doing bass track for bass, and I was just doing all this stuff contract, as a freelancer, and introduced the GoPro stuff. So I was supposed to work the next Classic for bass, and they had, like, GoPro had given us 100 GoPros to put out. So I had like 60 of them. I was supposed to put one on every boat. And it was, I was supposed to do bass track too, which is a phone in every boat. You're supposed to charge all that stuff up. So it was a pretty good bit of stuff I was supposed to be doing at the Classic. And we went out on that wild card, and I led day one, had 29 pounds. And so my boss calls me, and he's like, hey man, good luck. Really hope you do good tomorrow. And you could tell, like, he was sincere, but he's also thinking this is going to be a mess. So I went out on day 2 and caught 20 pounds, and I had pretty good lead going into the final day. And then I just bombed on the final day and finished 3rd. But that was kind of the deciding point in my career where I had to either choose to work or fish. And I was like, I don't really want to gamble on my mortgage. If I could guarantee a paycheck, I think I'll do that and still get to work and fishing. So I did that for a while, and it was really awesome. I got to meet, at the time, Van Dam and all those guys were still over there. So I got to meet like a lot of my heroes, and because I was trying to help get them coverage, basically I was a camera guy. I was shooting on the water photography and doing a little bit of writing and stuff and doing all the editing of the videos. So I had a role to play in the industry that was not competitive to them like it would have been if I was an angler. So instead, they wanted, to communicate with me and wanted to work with me because I was helping them. So it was really cool to get to know those guys in a way that I never would have gotten a chance to, even if I had have, qualified and went out there and fished the elites. They'd have been trying to kick my teeth in. Nobody even say hello, Awesome.
Otherwise, this way they welcomed you with open arms, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So it was really cool to get to meet a bunch of them. And so I did that, and I did primarily bass stuff Bassmaster, and worked for them for 4 or 5 years, and I was on the road all the time. And towards the end, it was like 250 days a year. For the last couple of years I did it, and I got burnt out, and it was really cool, but it was also, once the new wore off, I'm like gone for 5 weeks, home for 3 days, packed for 3 days, gone for 5 weeks. And it's just, it wore off. I made way too much out of it. I idolized the industry and the job and everything. It just took, I'm a Christian, and it took Christ's seat in my heart, honestly. Like, I just idolize it above everything else. And so in the end, it didn't bring any joy anymore. And so I bailed on the industry and pretty much just cut ties with fishing altogether, and didn't even like fishing around here or anything. And so a job came open at a farm, quote unquote, that my uncle had worked on for 23 years. And it's a deer property. It's a rich guy's playground is all it is. It's 5 minutes from my house. So I started doing that. And that's really where like the rehabilitation happened for me. And like, I just got to go out there and get on the tractor and grab a weed eater or whatever, and just be in nature every day. So that was really an awesome experience. And so that was about a 5-year stint. And during that time, the guys at Wire to Fish reached out to me, one of them named Walker Smith. And he's like, the very frank question he asked, like, what the hell happened to Shaye Baker? Like, where did you go? What happened? And I was sitting there and I was like, well, I don't really know what happened. And so that kind of got a cathartic thing going. And I wrote a couple pieces for them that were real in depth. And I battled bipolar depression and different things over the years. And just, it was really a cool deal. So that kind of got me back started in the fishing industry. And so for the last 3 or 4 years, I kind of started working more and more in the industry again, and had a much better relationship with it this time, and enjoyed it again. And, but I wasn't making it my world. And so then back in January, I went back to work full time in the fishing industry and for myself, and So I contract with Wired to Fish, Monsterbass, and Bassmaster again, and back covering the Elite Series. And it's been a real cool journey. But that's the long answer to your question of, where did I come from and what all have I done in the industry. So now it's writing primarily and then covering the Elite Series and maybe the Opens next year. And what's really cool is the travel was the part that was so taxing about it before. And I actually covered the Elite Series this year, half of it from home.
Wow.
Because now you can watch.
You can follow everything. Yeah.
So in the past, I would get in a boat and I'd go sit with a camera and try to shoot a picture of one guy. I'm 60 yards away at best. It's a strain and it's inconvenient if I'm hollering to him to try to get any information. And so they said the last few were in like South Dakota, Wisconsin, and New York. I'm down here in Alabama, so it was going to cost them twice as much to send me as they were going to pay me. They said, can you figure out a way to do it from home? So I sat there and watched the live stream for 8 hours, and I would just blog about it. So when the live stream came about, their blog kind of died off a few years ago. And what they realized recently is like everybody can't sit there and watch 8 hours of fishing as much as they might want to. And so I sat there and watched 8 hours of fishing, and I would just, kind of blog or document what was going on. And if anything happened, it was kind of neat. I would write about that, like 400 or 500 words. And then, if somebody caught 3 big ones real quick, I would write that, and so if somebody wanted to come in at 1 o'clock and catch up, there's a pretty good storyline of what's been going on. So one of the most taxing parts of it that burned me out before was just having to travel all the time. And this time going back around, I hadn't even had to do a lot of that. So I've been able to work like literally from right here, the hard decisions, do you sit on the recliner, the bar, put on pants, don't put on pants. It's a tricky deal. So.
Nice. Well, I'm so happy that, you were able to find, get back to it and come at it from the right perspective, and I think that it sounds like you have a much more healthy relationship with it this time around. And so I'm super glad that, you were able to find your way back, but on your terms. So congrats on that, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a good deal. Like I remember, like I said, my dad, I fished with him all my life. And there was a time about 4 or 5 years ago when I came off the road and I was drinking heavily at the time, and I've been 2 years sober, September 17th. And I don't have anything against drinking if you can handle it. I couldn't. I didn't drink till I was 29. And once I got started, I think I tried to catch up. And so I thank God I kicked it, a couple of years ago. But at the time, it's 4 or 5 years ago, and I'd go fishing with my dad in a local tournament, and I was miserable. And it was so frustrating because I'm like, one day he's going to pass, and I'm going to wish so badly that I had enjoyed it, but I couldn't even enjoy it, And at the time, it was just I was still trying to find meaning to life, and I was still trying to find the answer to everything in fishing because that was the closest thing I had. It was the thing that always brought me joy. And one time, the worst it ever got, I like backed the boat in. I was still working with bass at the time. I had like a $70,000 skeeter to use for the year, free and clear. And I had my own truck I was paying for, but I could fish anywhere I wanted to about any time unless I was working. And I remember backing the boat in the water, and I parked the truck, and I just sat there for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I got out, walked up there and got the truck back in, never made a cast. And I was just numb. I was miserable. And so that was the darkest times, because the thing that had always brought me joy was gone. But I remember about a year and a half ago now, it was back in January of 2021. And a lot of stuff has started clicking and making sense. Like I said, walking it out. I'd been a Christian since I was like 7, but I hadn't really walked it out. I was just kind of, all right, I'm going to heaven eventually, and just kind of whatever through this life. And I didn't realize, this life can be a lot better. And so was walking all that out, and I was like, fishing's gone. That's fine. It's not that big a deal. I'm happy and thankful for everything else. And I went fishing with my dad, just fun fishing, not even fishing a tournament on the old home lake. And it was like I was 10 again. Like I loved it that much. And it was so cool because it was like God giving my joy back for it once the order got right. And so that was a really cool thing. So I do have a healthier relationship with it now. The same things, it's a proclivity. It's this area I might slip up if I put too much focus on it. And so is work, in general, like all those things kind of creep back up, Right. And so it's all about keeping that priority, but so far so good. And, just got to lay it all back down every now and then. But fishing has been a a whole lot better last couple of years. Been able to enjoy it again.
Well, I'm super happy to hear that, man, because you know, to have something that gives you joy and then not have it, and then to reclaim it again, that's an awesome story. So
yeah, it's pretty scary there for a minute.
that struggle is definitely real. I can definitely relate to that. Maybe not on quite such a, you know, bigger scale like that. When I first got into kayak fishing, I think my 3rd year, I was trying to fish every kayak club and tournament and everything. I was gone like weekend after weekend after weekend, you know, and I would do okay. But like, you know, towards the end of the season, you know, it's just like, I'm tired, you know, and just like, you know, after you do things for so long, you know, you have like that wear and tear on you, whether it be, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, you know, and sometimes you're just like, what in the heck am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, and then you lose that spark in a sense too. And, you know, it almost becomes work in a sense, you know, when they say it becomes work, that's, you know, when you stop enjoying things. So then you're like, all right, I got to figure something out. I got to get my passion back. How do I do it? So that's awesome.
Well, speaking of your writing, one of the articles that you wrote that grabbed my attention, and I've been a Wired to Fish fan for a long time. Like I said, we had McKeon on, and he was cool, and you know, just the content you guys put out there is amazing. And one of the articles that I found that you wrote was on the free rig, and so I wanted to see if we could pick your brain about that a little bit, kind of to see where to start, and you know, kind of break it down from, you know, the different types of weights and stuff. We'll start by explaining what the free rig is.
Yeah, and I'm not a super expert at it or anything. I actually found out about it through John Cruz. He had come out with a Missile Baits 48 worm, and he and I are buddies. I met him through the Elite Series, but he had a few guys trying to come up with 48 ways to use that worm. And that was like the little video series they did. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it got a little, like at the end, I threw I threw 5 halves of them on an A rig, and I caught fish. Like, that was the goal. The goal
That's crazy.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's
the goal
awesome.
was to fish 48 different ways, you know. So
Wow.
I think one of them was like a double wacky rig with a flick shake weight, you know. So it's like an X, and it looked ridiculously good in the water. And I was like, this is awesome.
This might be, yeah, you might stumble upon the next great thing.
Coming up with stuff here, but that was one of the ones he said. He's like, hey, if you ever, you know, you want to try to do it on the free rig, you can do that one. And I was like, what's a free rig? So it's pretty cool. I wish I had the weights and worm and all here, but
I have weights and stuff. So
it's basically like a little bell weight with a there you go. And if you hold it from the bottom, you can see that there's a hole in the top of it.
Yep.
Yep. So what you do is you feed your line through that, and then when you feed your line through that, you tie it on to whatever hook you want, EWG, straight shank, worm hook. And so all it is simply that the weight is allowed to move freely on your fishing line. And it's kind of in some ways like a Carolina rig in that sense, but there's no restriction of it to move up and down. It can go all the way up to the nose of the worm. So you rig a worm, you know, weightless Texas rig on that worm, on that hook, and then your weight can just kind of come up. So it really is a cool technique too with like Z-Man soft plastics because they float. So, you know, if you drag it a little ways, the weight's going to come down to the nose of the worm. And then if you were to drop your rod tip, the worm could kind of float up a little bit, and then you drag it again. So it kind of moves freely. And it's a really good, I've caught fish on it in vegetation, especially sparse vegetation. Like whenever they're spawning, that's a good technique to use because you can throw it over in like little holes and stuff. And really you can drag it and just let the weight sit there, and the worm's going to have a little bit of movement. So even if you don't know that you're in a bed, if you just see a hole in the grass, I caught them on Seminole doing that before. And it's just a different finesse technique that, you know, the fish probably don't see quite as much. And I mean, it gets bit for sure. It's an easy rig to fish, or easy rig to rig.
No, and that's what kind of drew me to it initially. Because again, you know, our show tends to focus a little bit more on the kind of, you know, not to say that, you know, people with more advanced techniques and stuff don't watch or listen, but a lot of our audience is kind of beginning anglers, and And there's some rigs that we talk about and some techniques that do take a lot of, I don't know, the learning curve is steep. I'll say it that way. When I stumbled upon this, it seemed like it's easy to rig. It's not complicated, and it seems relatively easy to work, especially if you're like you said about using the Z-Man baits that actually float. So if you just work it slowly, you cast out, you let it sink, and then just give it slack and let the bait float back up, and then you pull it back down and move it a little bit, and then let it repeat. It seems like a pretty easy technique to use, I would think.
Yeah. And it's like if you think about a Tokyo rig or even a wobble head, stuff like that, it's kind of the same premise of a bait being able to wash around, but it's even easier for it to do it because there's no rigidity, there's no metal connection. It's just your fishing line going through a swivel, basically. So it's just a good clear water technique. I wouldn't probably throw it in mud. I mean, you could, but there wouldn't be as much of an appeal to it. It's mainly just something that the fish are going to sit there and look at for a minute. And where a Texas rig might just lay there, this has a little bit of movement, just kind of looks a little more natural.
And I know in the article you talk about it being like similar to like a bullet weighted, like with a free bullet weight, where you just unpeg or don't peg the bullet weight. But it has some advantages over that. And I was trying to remember what you said in the article that made it a little bit better than that or different than that.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I said in that one. It's been a while since I wrote it, but basically, like if you're fishing a Texas rig through like wood, it might be a little better because you got that cone shape. Like if you're fishing in rocks, then your line, the entry point of your line is in the tip of that weight, and you're dragging that across the rocks. With that free rig, your line's up higher, and you're dragging that bail weight across the bottom. So your weight's on the bottom. And one of the things I might have said about it is you get more noise because you're dragging that weight along the bottom versus when you go to drag a Texas rig, you're either dragging your line or it's trying to pick that weight up off the bottom just because the way the entry point is into the nose of the weight.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I think that the noise is what I was remembering. And that made a lot of sense. One thing I was going to ask, you mentioned in the article about when you cast it out, if you allow the weight to go the whole way to the end, then it works almost like a pegged weight. But you mentioned that if you cast it with slack, and I was curious how you do that. Like, how do you not keep it at the end?
I'm trying to remember what I said in that one. I don't think I've ever done anything like to try to put a bobber stopper on there or anything, which we wouldn't stop it. It would just kind of bump over it. When you drop your rod, a little bit of line kind of goes back through, and it will loosen up a little bit. When you drag, if you go to drag like you would a Carolina rig and then reel down like a Carolina rig, if you just kind of drop your rod, don't reel it all the way down, it'll slide back out a little bit because you can kind of feel it when you go to reel it the next time. It'll slip and then boom, hit,
Gotcha.
I don't remember what I said in there about
that's okay. I didn't mean to put you.
Yeah, I had actually brought up the article here, trying to follow it along as you guys are talking about here, and you were saying on slackline the weight falls fairly straight, but what you'll see is that the soft plastic quickly separates itself from the weight.
Oh yeah, like so once you throw it out there, then you drop your rod, and while the weight's sinking, it'll like slide down your line.
Gonna be
So the worms kind of like there's more drag on the worms that's falling. If you hold your line tight, it's going to just stay right there on the nose. But when you cast it out, the weight will be right up against the worm. But whenever you stop and if you drop your rod and let it fall on a slack line, the weight will kind of fall down. And by the time it gets to the bottom, there'll be essentially what looks like a 2-foot leader. But again, once you drag it, it kind of comes back down to it.
And no offense to all the people that I've had try and teach me the drop shot, but that sounds like it's easier to me to use than the drop shot.
Yeah.
Because I have tried the drop shot a million times, and I don't know what it is about it, but I don't catch fish on it. And we've talked to some of the best drop shotting people I could find, and they've told me a million different ways to try and work it. And I don't know what it is, but it's just a point of frustration for me because I hear so many people, oh man, I was crushing one on drop shot. And I'm like, yeah, no, not me. But this, when you talked about this being kind of an alternative for a drop shot, because one thing that I, with the drop shot that I always struggle with is if I'm not finding fish vertically, it seems like drop shots, the presentation works best when you can just drop it right, like vertically through them. But you talk about in the article a little bit about this being kind of an alternative to the drop shot that you can cast out and work back and have it kind of still do the same thing.
Yeah, a drop shot. A lot of folks will cast it. Like I don't have live scope or any forward facing sonar right now, but I had it for a while, and I would pitch a drop shot. And I would do that too before forward facing sonar came out. Like around here, when the drop shot first came out, and you could get, there'd be a brush pile in 10 feet of water. The brush pile sticks up 8 feet. You're 2 foot over it with your trolling motor. Your trolling motor's about to touch it. Fish is sitting there, and you drop it, and the fish would eat it on the fall. I mean, you're right on top of them, And then everybody started doing it, so you had to start triangulating. So you'd back off 15 feet, and you'd have a waypoint on your graph or whatever. So you ease up, and you're like, I know it's pretty much right there, and I know that tree's over there. It's like what the old guys used to do. And so you kind of line up everything, and then you pitch that drop shot, and so it would fall. And if you did a good pitch, you would basically be dropping it vertically, but you wouldn't be dropping it vertically. It would fall vertically, 15 feet out in front of you, right in the middle of that treetop. You catch them. Well, now with forward-facing sonar, you got to be 40, 50 feet away. So it's like the fish they're learning and becoming more and more aware, and like they can hear your boat, they can hear your trolling motor, they can hear the electronics. That forward-facing sonar is one of the loudest things out there, and I've heard it just like when you take your trolling motor up. If you just duck your head down a couple of feet from it, you just hear it clicking. And I had a buddy that was telling me about it that dove and was shooting some underwater footage, and he said it was louder. Like there was an outboard running by a pretty good ways off, but like he said, the forward-facing sonar, that ping was louder than that outboard running.
Interesting.
That from the area, he was pretty close to the sonar, obviously, but it was loud. He said underwater. So the fish are getting more and more and more accustomed to it. So stuff like this that you can cast that free rig way out, and essentially fish it like there's another rig called a split shot rig, which is basically just a little Carolina rig. So you take a split shot, and like this free rig, it'd have like a leader that's maybe 12, 14 inches long, but you clamp it on your line so it's fixed, and it's essentially just like a little Carolina rig, and that's real good too. But the free rig allows it just to slide up and down. But those kinds of things that you can cast horizontally and fish are a little easier to fish to me than a drop shot in that sense, because one thing is like that free rig, I can fish it on a baitcaster, and I prefer that, personally, to a spinning reel, especially when I'm having to fight a fish in from a distance that might bury up in cover or something like that. When it's vertical, it's one thing, you can just pull them on up out of the cover, and a lot of times before they realize they're hooked, they're out of the stuff, But anytime they're out there, you're fishing beside a dock and they take off under a dock and pop your line, I'd rather have a baitcaster with straight fluorocarbon versus a braided line to a leader and all that. So the free rig kind of, to me, is a little bit better for some of that stuff.
Gotcha. No, and that was another thing that kind of drew me to it, is the kind of if universality is a word, whatever. It's probably not a word.
Versatile.
But there you go. Versatility. That's the word I was thinking of. Because there are people that will not touch a spinning rod, and then probably just as much of our audience doesn't yet have a good handle on baitcasters yet. Mm-hmm. So this is a rig and a technique that you can use on both. Mm-hmm. And in the article, you also mentioned, using the bigger, heavier ball weights, like fishing for largemouth. But then also, if you're looking for smallmouth, you can switch up to like a drop shot weight or a cylinder weight, mm-hmm. and fish it kind of later and kind of really, there's so many different plastics you can use, so many different weights. And I even have some weights that I got once upon a time. It's a cylinder weight, but it has a rattle in it. So I'm like, this might be even good for that. So I'm going to give this a try and see how it works. But is there anything else on this rig that you can think of? Susie, did you see anything when you're reading through that you would think somebody just picking up would need to know to kind of make it work for them, or any other tips you can offer?
It can be kind of a light bite sometimes because you're feeling the weight versus the hook, mm-hmm. a lot of times. Same with a Carolina rig, you'll feel the weight on the bottom, and sometimes the bite it gets mushy because the fish hits it, and then it picks that weight up off the bottom, and that's what you're actually feeling. So this kind of can be the same thing. There's a little bit more of a direct contact with the bait because the line's going straight through, but sometimes you'll just notice your bait swimming off. A fish has got it and swimming off with it versus feeling a thump like you would with a jig or a Texas rig. But I mean, other than that, and you just do like a sweep and hook set. It's the best way to do it. It's not like a drop and pop them because typically you're using a fairly light wire hook, and you're not going to want to snatch really hard because you'll bend the hook out. And you're not, 12 to 15 pound test line.
I was just going to ask you about that too. Yeah.
That's probably best. Basically if you're using 12-pound test and like a thin wire EWG, 2-aught hook or something like that, or if you can beef it up to like a 4-aught super line EWG hook and 15 pounds, 17 pounds. It just depends on kind of what you're fishing around, what size fish you're fishing for. Like I said, you could go to Seminole and you're fishing for 5-6 pounders around beds, but they're spooky and water super clear. Been a bunch of boats around, that kind of stuff, and you're kind of trying to fan cast spawning areas versus actually seeing them. So you might have to beef up to 17 or 20 pound, fluorocarbon with a bigger weight and a bigger hook and soft plastic and all that. It's really whatever you want to do with it. You can kind of be creative.
Yeah, it definitely caught my eye. So I'm from the central Illinois area, and, we've got a lot of strip mine areas, a lot of dirty water and whatnot. But we also have like a lot of weeds and cover, thick vegetation and whatnot. And like just the idea of that, of just kind of working it along those weed edges and whatnot, having it like float up as your weight's kind of down low, like that seems like it'd be pretty juicy in those situations. So I'm going to give it a little try this spring because I'm like, man, I bet that would work really good.
Central Illinois, the Mississippi River comes through there, right?
Yeah, so it's the closest one I'm close to is the Illinois River. So like I'm like almost dead central Illinois. The Mississippi is on the west side of the state.
I think I covered a college bass tournament, and it was supposed to be on the Mississippi River, and it was like a 25-foot flood or something. The coolest thing was there was like a big nasty snake, because I went to take pictures of how bad it was to say, we're not gonna be able to do it here, and we had to move it. There was a big old snake, and I took a picture of it, I remember, but there was like trees the size of houses floating down the river.
Oh yeah.
And it took them forever to find us somewhere else to go to fish a tournament that could hold I think they had like 60 or 70 boats, and we ended up moving the tournament 4 hours down to South Illinois to some lake, and it was still a small lake. It was probably 500 or 600 acres. And, that is a big struggle in Illinois because Illinois permits, when you put them in, it's usually for a max of 50. So you got to find a lake that has more than one ramp that you could, do 2 permits for, 50 people each to have 100 anglers. But we don't exactly have like huge lakes. We've got a couple power plant lakes that are pretty good. We've got Newton, San Chris. There used to be one in Southern Illinois, Coffeen. It used to be a power plant lake, but I don't think it runs anymore. But I'm near what's called Banner Marsh, and it's a bunch of strip mines and whatnot. So like we've got a little bit of everything there. So, but I like them, know. I'm spoiled coming from Alabama because again, like you got water everywhere. There's,
right?
Where I'm sitting right now, there's 10 good lakes that people have heard of within 2 hours of me. Garner, 3.5, that Tennessee River and all, and then down to Eufaula's 2 hours. So, but it's not necessarily a good thing. We could stand to have a little restriction too, because there'll literally be 1,000 boats on Gunnersville on a weekend.
Jesus,
and it's exhausting. So it's not.
Yeah, I bet.
It would be. It's the Wild Wild West out here, but it would be good for there to be some stuff. But like you go up to New York and they've got signs everywhere and fines if you move a boat that's got some vegetation hanging from the prop.
Yes.
There's all kinds of rules all over the place. So down here, we're just, trim her out and let her eat most of the time.
You're free range out there. Yeah.
And that brought up another point. You talked about how the free rig does work well in grass because it seems like it's pretty weedless for the most part. The weight's going to catch some grass, I would imagine, but your Texas rig, plastic isn't going to.
Yeah, that's one of the things that kind of the worm, like I said, if it does separate a little bit, there might be some weeds that catch on the weight, and you can just kind of pop it loose. But with a lot of the other stuff, like a Texas rig or a shaky head or whatever, once you get that stuff on the weight, you just about got to reel it in and pick it off, where the worm kind of sits there and looks pretty normal. It's kind of like a drop shot in that sense because the weight's catching, but the worm still looks pretty good. So I don't know why. I don't know how bass is. I've never caught a fish, to my knowledge, with some grass on it. I don't know how they know that's not real, but it's like you get a little old twig of pine straw on there and you might as well reel it in.
Oh, I know. I was just fishing. I live right near the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania here. And I was fishing a crankbait, and our grass is really starting to die off now, but it's still just enough to catch. Like, it can be like the thinnest little tiny string of something. And I'm like, how does the fish even notice that? I'm like, I guess grass doesn't stick to fish. It must not ever, because they pretty much, if they see that, they don't even touch it. So
yeah, every crawfish ever was perfectly clean for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. They repel grass. That's that. If you could, make a bait that could repel grass, that'd be the thing.
Had a little orb around it where it goes to the water and it sends all the bubble. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Man, I'm gonna have to work on that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that covers the free rig a little bit. Anything else you'd be throwing right now that you think would be a good technique? I know obviously your water temperatures and stuff are probably a little different than Susie and mine up here, but not vastly, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know for y'all. Anywhere Kentucky Lake down, and maybe not all the way into Florida, but some of the Florida lakes too. Threadfin shad and shad in general are our main forage, and they come crashing on the shores, and there'll be so many of them that a lot of times you have to downsize, and that's one of the big things around here in the fall, like throwing a rooster tail instead of a half-ounce spinnerbait, or throwing like a little Hopkins spoon across the top, throwing a quarter-ounce trap instead of a half-ounce, stuff like that. Smaller square bills, smaller medium diving crankbaits. There's a ARC mini diver that I reviewed for Wired to Fish, and I think that's the one that Clint Davis calls it, or maybe that's not it, but I think that's the one Clint Davis calls it, like the auto bass, because it's just like a little bitty crankbait, but it's got two pretty good size EWG treble hooks on it, and it just catches them. It catches anything in the food chain. So this time of year, that's one of the big things around here, or around the majority of the South, is having to dial it back on the size, because there's just so many shad to choose from, and you either got to really imitate one that's dying by fishing slow with like a fluke or something, or try to downsize a little bit and let them pick out that smaller bait out of the batch. Instead of it's just like a line and a gazelle, they're going to go for the little baby that just newborn versus the big one that's running a lot faster.
That makes sense. Pick off the weak ones, right? Awesome, man. Well, I think Susie, do you have any other questions? I think we've covered that pretty well. So if you have nothing else, man, then I wanted to give you a chance to just shout out where folks can find you and follow your writings and everything, and any other social media you wanted to shout out.
Yeah, I mainly write for Wired to Fish. I write a couple of articles a week, or an article and a review for them a week, and then write a couple of articles a week for Monsterbass, which is like a subscription box company, and we've got a blog going on there that's going real well. So do stuff for them, and then Bassmaster, I'll write an article occasionally for them, but primarily I'll cover the Elite Series for them, and then like I said, may go back to doing some with the Opens too next year, but tournament coverage with those guys, now again I'm primarily blogging for them, and you never know with me, I may be shooting pictures, writing stories, shooting video. I back when I was doing it full time before, like I'd go to Little Rock where the studio was and do some commentating for the college national championships and stuff. Or I shot shoulder cam with Edwin Evers one time. I got in the boat with him, and that was a trip. But he good dude, but he's worried about somebody noticing where he was or whatever. And I'm trying to walk around. First time I ever done it, like a cinder block on my shoulder shooting TV. But there was a little bit of everything I did before, and it was a really good time. But mostly now just writing. So Bassmaster, Wire to Fish or Monsterbass is the best places to track down some of my stuff.
Now Monsterbass, do you talk to Alex Rudd at all with that, or?
Yeah, he and I known each other for a long time. Ben Nowak's another good guy.
Yep, absolutely.
I never have. I've hung out with him a couple times at like riders events or something. We had one for Angler, is another company I worked with for a while, and we had like a summit with those guys, and I got to hang out with that son. But he's a good dude, and he loves it and fired up about it and all. And he's been with Monsterbass a while. And like I said, Ben Nowak, I'm going to do an article with him before too long on when to not use forward-facing sonar, and talk about some of the times when you just need to turn it off and it's actually detrimental to what you're doing versus beneficial. So talk about that a little bit. But yeah, those guys are good dudes.
Cool. And I wanted to give you a chance to shout out any sponsors or anything like that you wanted to cover.
Yeah, my sponsors are Monsterbass, Bassmater, and Wire to Fish. I don't really do much sponsor stuff now so much as just get paid to work. So, which is, what a lot of folks are doing with sponsors. But I don't really affiliate with any particular company. I do a whole bunch of product reviews and stuff like that now. So it's one of those deals where, like, I got this Costa hat on. Costa sent it to me with a pair of sunglasses to review. It's not a sponsor. It's just, gear. And my hair was a mess. So I was looking around for a hat.
Hey. If I didn't wear a hat, you'd probably be blinded by the reflection. So we do what we got to do.
I got a lot of good companies I work with and work for and all, but I don't really have any sponsors per se.
That's got to be pretty cool too, to just get to test out lots of different stuff, and
Yeah, it is, and it's a neat deal. Like I like fishing tackle. I'm like anybody else that likes to fish, and I hoard it, and so I'll end up selling a bunch of stuff here and there because it's just the shop's overloaded. But it's pretty neat to get. It's a great way to find stuff that I like, because I'm guilty of. I've got 5 or 6 baits that I'm gonna have tied on just about every time. And once I find something, I'll find a spinner bait and I'll use it for 7 or 8 years. There's other good stuff out there, but I got confidence in that one. And I primarily either fish for now product reviews to shoot pictures with fish catches and stuff, test out the products, or tournaments. So if I'm going to go fish a tournament, it's hard for me to just go buy a different rod. Why would I? I got rods I like. So it's been pretty interesting. I've actually found some really good stuff because I was forced to fish with other stuff. So I actually sold like a lot of the stuff I liked, to where I would, like rods in particular, it would force me to use the other rods, because if I don't, then I'm going to use it for like 2 days. I don't really have a good judge of how good of a rod it is. I like baits. I could throw a bait for 3 or 4 hours, catch a fish or two on it. And I know what it's got good hooks, it's got a good build, it break, whatever. But rods, I mean, you need a couple months with a rod and reel before you can really give a good assessment of it. So it's been a good way for me to find a lot of good stuff, like that little Arc Mini Dive, or Arc Mini, whatever it is, little mini dive and crankbait. I was trying to think of some of the other stuff, like the Mini Max, the Chatterbait Mini Max. Love that thing. It's so cool. And I've thrown a chatterbait, ever since they came out. And I probably wouldn't have tried that thing if it wasn't for I had to do a review on it. So find a lot of cool baits like that. That Z-Man Hellraiser is a pretty cool bait too.
Just lost one. I got my first one and I lost it my second time in. I snagged it and lost it. But yeah, it was ridiculous. The action is amazing and it's easy. It does everything for you.
But I mean, when I saw it, like, I'm not going to buy that. It looks ridiculous. You know what I mean? But I threw it because they sent it to me. So I threw it and I was like, that's pretty awesome. It's like a topwater mixed with a chatterbait. This is fantastic. Exactly. So it's stuff that there's a lot of baits that I would turn my nose up before at, or I'm not going to spend $10 and just try it, Right. And so since they sent them to me, I try them, and I found a lot of good stuff that I really like that I would have never tried if it weren't for my job. Because I just keep fishing with the thing that catches them already.
Well, yeah. And I think, just finding those diamonds in the rough, if you will, even with rods, there's so many rods choices out there that it's really overwhelming when you're, especially for people just getting into it. And, you can break the bank buying crazy stuff, but there's, stuff that isn't as high priced that works, maybe not as, great as the super high end stuff, but we'll get the job done for a lot less money. And so I think, being able to test that out and kind of find those deals and those things that have just the right combination of stuff to really knock it out of the park would be a cool gig. And so I look forward to reading some of your stuff about that. And that's the thing, when you write those articles, is it tough to kind of, are you allowed to stay unbiased, or are you pretty much how does that
like
work?
the main thing you try to do is what you call a compliment cookie. So if you got something negative to say, say it. I'm gonna be honest, but I always try to sandwich it between a couple of nice things. And there's always something you can say good about it. And I'm from the South, Mom said, if you ain't got something nice to say, don't say none at all. But at the same time, I'm gonna be honest. And there'll be some stuff I try that's just this garbage, and I just don't write about it. I just don't review that, because I'm not gonna go out there and bash something either. But if you ever see me say like this is a good product, then it's something I believe in. And I'd like to just go out there and there's a guy that had a website that did really well for a little while, because he would just go out there and unabashedly just bash everything. And for the first month or two, everybody's like, "Oh, this is cool, man. This dude's really telling the truth," And then that just became his shtick, and he just started harping on anglers and companies, and it became super negative, and everybody got turned off by it. So it's one of those deals where it's, there's a line you got to kind of toe, because you don't want to just bash something. And there's also the chance, like, you get a bait and it's the 1 out of 1,000 that the bill breaks on. And so I'm not just going to run somebody in the mud on something, but if there's something, and I try stuff sometimes, it's just not any good. And so I don't write about it. And if there's something that I do like, and like a lot of times, one of the funny stories, I typically try to find something negative to say, because I don't want everybody to say like all he ever does is say everything's great. But so like Zoom, I've used a twin tail trailer of theirs, the split tail, forever. It's one my dad put me on a long time ago, and it's a real good trailer for spinner baits and chatterbaits. It's really cool too, because it kind of sticks out behind the skirt and it goes crazy with the chatterbait's vibration. So I wrote one on that trailer, and I've used it for 10 years, and nobody had ever reviewed it for Wire to Fish. So I was like, oh, that's an easy one. I got a bunch of them here, and it's a bait I got a ton of confidence in. I'll just do one on that. So I did one on that, and somewhere throughout it, I was like, yeah, the only thing, they got pretty good shad colors and everything. They don't have any green pumpkin, and I like green pumpkin chatterbait. So I said, that'd be pretty cool, is to have a green pumpkin split tail trailer. But other than that, I like this about it and that about it. It's pretty tough, the fish don't tear it up too bad, and yada, yada, yada. Well, about 3 weeks later, in the mail, there's a package, and it's like, hey, really enjoyed the review on the twin tail. Here's some green pumpkin. And Zoom sent me a special run of like 10 packs of green pumpkin.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. So apparently people are reading the stuff, but it was,
I was just going to say, you got the right people reading it for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the thing I tried to say negative. It was almost like they were like, well, here you go, And so yeah, that, it's a fun job, and it's a good job. And it's, again, having that right relationship with it to where I get to enjoy it, but it's not my world, like it used to be, has really made it a whole lot better this go around. We'll
Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to ask you, do you do any kayak fishing? I know you talk about big boat stuff, but we, not that we are all about kayak fishing here on Paddle and Fin, but it is one of our things. So I just was curious, did you ever try out the little plastic boats?
Yeah. If you want to do some digging, about 2 or 3 years ago, I was burnt out on fishing, like I said, and I was trying to do a little bit of stuff on Instagram and YouTube and stuff still. I had kind of gotten started back. I think I was working with Angler at the time, and so I was trying to do some stuff with them, and I was just burnt out on fishing. So I was like, and I didn't have a boat at the time. I've had a boat since I was like 16. So I sold it, and I was just like, whatever, And so I was like, I'm going to try this kayak fishing. Everybody's talking about kayak. I'm going to get into it. So there's a video on YouTube of me buying my first kayak. I went to Tractor Supply and bought a $200 kayak, and it was miserable. I named it Teacup is what it got named, and it was the most unstable. And I'm talking about like you're sitting, I don't know if y'all can see my knees here, but you're sitting down in a hole like that, and I wore shorts the first time. My legs got blistered like a tomato. I didn't think about paddling far away. You got to paddle back. I was on a lake, so I get a pretty good ways off just trying to fish. And I'm like, my back's killing me. So I just got out on the shore somewhere and stretched for a little while. And I'm like, I got to do this all the way back. My legs were, like I said, tomato red. And but I remember like I hooked like a 1.5 pound, 2 pound spot, and it turned the boat around. And I'm trying to get hold of it, splashing water all over me and everything. And I was just loving it. I was giddy, I was enjoying it. And I was like, this is pretty cool. Because in a bass boat, in which I actually made a T-shirt that said kayaks or bass boats too, whenever I was doing this for a little while.
That's awesome.
But, yeah. And I had one that had on there, had a guy with a paddle like this, and it said the original 2-stroke. I made a few T-shirts like that. But anyway, in a bass boat, I'd have caught that fish and just threw it back, and I'd have been annoyed that the fish had bit because I'm trying to catch a 5-pounder or something. But in a kayak, it's so much harder to get bit, or especially for me just starting out with nothing but a paddle and all. And so that kind of got me on fire for kayak fishing for a little while. And I'm one of those, like, if I do get excited about something, I'll just jump all over it. So I never did fish any kayak tournaments, but we have local bass boat tournaments here. And that me and my dad fish, and there'd be like 7 or 8 boats, especially once it gets tough in the summer. And so, nobody's catching anything. 7 pounds is winning. So I was like, man, I'm making videos. I'm like, I'm gonna go get my kayak. I'm gonna fish against these guys in my kayak. So I made me. You got to weigh your fish in, So I made me a live well out of an ice chest, and filled it slap full of water. Didn't know what I was doing. Filled it slap full of water. And don't get a bite for like 3 hours, and I'm just hauling around this 40 or 50 pounds of water, and just miserable. Had nothing but a paddle. And I don't remember if it was the first one or the second one. I did it a couple of times. I think it was the first one. But I ended up catching 7 pounds. I won the tournament against 5 bass.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There's a whole video of it. Yeah. What was so funny is because like all my buddies that I was fishing against, my dad was out there in his boat and everything. And all of them are giving me crap, and they know I didn't cheat, but they're trying to say, and then I'm like, I got a GoPro going the whole time. So there's footage of me catching 7 pounds. I got big fish, like a 2.5 pounder. It was just brutally tough. But yeah, I won that. And it was so funny because I did that on the Middle Pond, which is like this little lake below Lake Martin. And so the next week there was one on Lake Martin on Tuesday night. So I show up there with my kayak. I'm like, let's try again, And this guy pulls up, and this guy I've known forever, and he was fishing down there the Wednesday before. And he said, look, don't do that again. I said, what? He said, don't. I'm telling you, do not. If you got enough to win, throw them back. He said, I heard so much crap from everybody at work this week. I told him, if y'all got your money, come down there and fish too. And he was like, dude, do not do that, So that night I didn't catch anything. I think I literally zeroed. And Lake Martin's a different beast. There's like giant boats going by. I made a video of that too. And there's like this boat big as my house coming by, and I'm in this kayak, I had lights because it's night tournaments, so half of it's in the daytime, half of it's at night. So I don't have any registration because I just got a paddle. I don't have a motor. So I got navigation lights rigged off batteries and everything, trying to be legal. And I did that 2 or 3 times, and I was like, all right, that's enough of that. But and I did that out of a bona fide SS 127 or something like that. It was a really good kayak. I borrowed that from a buddy. But that wasn't out of teacup. Teacup couldn't handle all that. Yeah, I did do a little bit of kayak fishing there for a little while.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, again, we're getting on near an hour here, so I thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us. And I love your story, man. It's awesome that you kind of found your way back to loving everything again, and happy to hear your faith got you where you are too. And cool, man. Susie, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, awesome.
All right, Shaye. Well, thank you again so much, brother. I appreciate you coming on here. Guys, check out the show notes for links to all of the places you can find Shaye and his sponsors. And until next time, guys, this has been Bass Fishing for News, where we bring you the tricks, the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. You guys have a good night.
Enjoyed it. Good to see y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode here on Paddle and Fin. Be sure to drop a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or smash that subscribe button on any platform you're listening in on. Be sure to check us out on Waypoint TV, waypointtv.com. Make sure you sign up for the Fantasy Kayak Fishing League at paddleandfin.com/fantasy. You could support this show through Patreon, patreon.com/paddleandfin. Don't forget to check out the website, paddleandfin.com. Catch us on YouTube. If you got a question, comment, or want to see a future guest on the show, be sure to email us at paddleandfin@gmail.com. Shout out to our show supporters, Yak Gadget. You can check out all the fine kayak accessories at yakgadget.com. Pelican Professional. For all your cases, coolers, and lighting needs, go to pelican.com. Rocktown Adventures, your Midwest premier paddle sports destination. Go to rocktownadventures.com. Eastport Marina, the beautiful destination on Dale Hollow Lake. If you're looking for lodging, kayaks, kayak accessories, or anything fishing related on the beautiful Dale Hollow Lake, go to eastport.info. And Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com and fill your tackle boxes today.